Hello, SVS, Facebook, and YouTube community. Welcome back to what is our 5th installment of the SVS Virtual Audiophile Happy Hour. As always, great to see the comments, great to see people who have already shown some excitement about this. Obviously, Larry, Gary, and I are super excited, and we're also excited for our guest today. Larry, how are things with you out there in Texas?
They're good. It's hot. It's been very warm. But school officially ended yesterday for my kids virtually, so we were excited for that. And now it's a summer of introducing them to new movies or old movies. Yeah.
So a summer of pretty much the same thing you would do even if
typically just without going anywhere to do some of it. So
that's right. And Gary, things well in the Maryland area?
Yeah. So happy to be part of this again. Happy to be hanging with our SBS community. I don't know how many people are on here, but it looks like a lot just looking at the comments. And, as I always do before we get started, I want to totally acknowledge we're in very, very strange times. I know that there are folks out there who are suffering. Some people have gotten sick. Some people have loved ones who have gotten sick, maybe even lost loved ones. Maybe some of us have lost some work or other kinds of hardships. So we don't in any way want to do anything other than share our love for our community and just our desire to be with all of you guys. That's what this is about. We're doing it every other week. I was telling, we try to plan a little bit out what we're going to say, but to me, none of the planning matches the amount of fun that we just have being with you guys on these, in these events.
Yeah, and I think, just the comments we're seeing now, it's very gratifying to kind of see the excitement and the passion, because we just love bringing it to everyone. And I think what I'd like to kick off today talking about a little bit, and this actually came from an opportunity. Somebody invited me from the media world to talk a little bit about getting younger people engaged to the world of audio. And one of the questions that we always ask our guests is, what is our definition of the modern audiophile? Like, what has the evolution been like from the olden days till now? And I pull no punches. I personally think you can be an audiophile and be into gaming. You can be into action movies. You can be into horror movies. You can be into whatever you want, as long as you care about great sound and you're willing to acknowledge that it's worth investing in. Then to me, you're an audiophile. You don't need to be that person in the the sweet spot listening to the 2-channel speakers with nobody else around you. It's very much more about the appreciation. And so I think with some of the news that's been coming out recently, it sort of supports that I won't call it an argument, but it supports that definition that we like to sort of promote here at SVS. So Gary, what are your thoughts? What is your definition of the modern audiophile, and how does it relate to sort of what's going on in the world right now?
Well, I was thinking about this today because I had a Zoom call with some really cool people from the Washington performing arts community. They're the folks that put on so many of the classical jazz, dance kinds of events in Washington at the Kennedy Center and different places like that in Washington. And we were talking about how people are so hungry for these awesome events that are coming down on YouTube because we're all locked up at home. I think we talked a couple weeks ago about that Post Malone Nirvana tribute concert where everybody was in a different house and it was this YouTube event, and I found it totally thrilling. But I guess what I'm saying is, every kind of experience deserves to be upgraded to make it as close as possible to what the artist was hoping to, what they're hearing, what the producer is hearing, and to rigidly define that it has to be 2-channel or rigidly define that it has to be vinyl or high res or whatever it is seems to lock out so many wonderful experiences that we can all have together. So now, besides talking about streaming music services like Spotify or Qobuz or Tidal, or talking about Blu-ray or streaming movie services like Netflix or Hulu or Amazon Prime or anything Apple TV, now we're also talking about these really interesting, cool live virtual events that are coming down on YouTube. And I'm becoming a little bit of a connoisseur of them, and I'm trying to upgrade my experience so that I can enjoy the sound of those too.
It's interesting you say that, because I know we've talked before how hard it is to find a good concert Blu-ray disc to demo. And now it's like these things are all happening live. And you have to think the sound quality is just going to keep getting better and better and better with these live broadcasts. And it's going to be almost like that immersive experience, not with the thousands of people around you, but at least that sort of immersive experience that you get when you go to a live concert, which I know, you love to. So that's what I'm excited about. Now, from the movie side of things, Larry, how do you envision this modern audiophile definition?
Well, you guys know I'm a movie junkie, and looking at everything, the way streaming's going, the way video is getting better, audio is getting better with 4K, Atmos, all that. Then you mentioning what's happening with concerts too. We streamed the Nixons doing a live concert Saturday night, and some of you might remember them from the 90s, but we saw that audio was a lot better than it was a few weeks back. And watching Netflix this weekend, most of that content's coming across in Atmos too, depending on what devices you have. So it's only getting better.
Yeah, and I should back up here. I think we jumped in a little prematurely. We have new people joining every couple weeks, which is awesome. So just so everyone understands the format, we are going to be doing 4 random giveaways throughout the evening. We're just picking names at random. So if you leave a comment, you're pretty much entered for the giveaway. And we'll do, the first one up here in a couple minutes, and we'll do the other 3 throughout the night. Tonight, we're doing a pair of Prime bookshelf speakers, Prime wireless sound base, a SB2000 Pro subwoofer, and a PB1000 subwoofer. So we'll call out the names, we'll say what you want, and then we'll contact you and get all that set up. So anyone who's asking about that, that's sort of the format that we like to take. And the other thing I'll mention too is, Gary, you mentioned Tidal, and there was a pretty big announcement today. Tidal will be streaming in Dolby Atmos. And this is kind of big news, because I think music hasn't really been associated with Dolby Atmos and sort of the height effect stuff. So to me, this is big news, and I hope, it's the sign of a lot more of this to come. So I don't know if either one of you want to react to that.
Well, and I'm not sure what this is yet. I need to drill into it, but I know that Dolby is developing Atmos formatting for music only. So it's not a movie, it's music only. It's full high res 5.1.2, I believe, music. So you can literally have object-based surround sound, 360 degree, but also 3-dimensional surround sound with music. So to me, that is absolutely a thrilling idea. In fact, we have a friend from Larry and my past, Tim Pride, is the person running it at Dolby, and I think it's going to be phenomenal. And every time something like that happens, it reinvigorates people's excitement about music. And who knows where it can go from there? Can you imagine a live concert streamed in full-on Dolby Atmos? We can't go to concerts right now, right? So wouldn't it be cool to have a live concert that you could hear in almost the full glory of the live experience in your own home?
Yeah, the kind of advancement of Dolby music has been happening over the last couple of years too. One of my favorite pickups is the NXS Kick album on its 30th anniversary. The actual studio producer went back in and remastered it in Atmos. And today they announced that, or in the last day or so, in the fall, NXS had a live concert that was filmed in Wembley years ago, and they've gone back and remastered it in 4K and Dolby Atmos, and that comes out next month. So you will be seeing that at some of our events, I am sure.
Awesome. I mean, it's a hot topic right now. We actually are hoping to get a guest on here who works for one of the major production studios, who's actually at the forefront of getting music that's, older recordings updated into the Atmos format. So hopefully that all plays out, and it's, a whole bunch more great content for us to enjoy, because I know there'll be a lot of people excited to get down with that, especially, Prime Elevation folks and some others. So the next thing,
hey Nick, we should say these comments are coming in so fast this time that we will figure out a way to get to all your comments, read them, and for the following one in 2 weeks, we will make sure we have the right some of your questions and comments reflecting on that program. They're coming in, and they're long and thoughtful ones, Nick. I don't know if you're able to see these.
I'm seeing them.
I really want to make sure people get their comments acknowledged,
they're
which we can do maybe
fast.
not in real time, but in the next one.
It's hard to catch up, but just so everyone knows, we do go back through them, look at them all, and then we inject them into future broadcasts. So don't think they'll go looked over, because we're definitely paying attention. It's just hard to keep
overlooked.
Up.
You mean? We will look them over.
Absolutely. So the next thing, we had a question actually that sort of gets to the heart of who SVS is as a company. And we always say we're not going to make this an infomercial. It's not going to be overly self-serving. But before we do a giveaway, I have to give a shout out to our first guest, Ed Mullen, because this kind of pertains to him and his team. Steve S. asked, your speakers and subwoofers are great, but what made SVS put such a commitment to customer service? And I know there's a lot of people in the comments here who probably have had an experience with Ed or with one of our team members, and we pride ourselves on that. So Gary, I mean, you brought a philosophy with you that was, a little bit different, and I'm just curious to understand what sort of led to that commitment to customer service and why we double down sort of in that aspect.
Well, I think it's been in the SVS culture. This sounds like something, I don't know, you say, but it's really true. It's been in the SVS culture that we're all kind of doing it together. We're all kind of experiencing it together. So for example, everybody at SVS cares about great sound. Everybody at SVS cares about our products, even like, people that you might not think would, like somebody from the finance department or somebody in the warehouse. But that doesn't just include people that work for SVS. It includes all of our customers. They're all in it with us, and we're talking with them constantly. And because of that, I think we've created a culture in our company, this is real, where they're part of us. They care about our company. They're part of our community. Maybe they bought a product, or maybe they're just interested in this stuff and would like to buy a product one day. We're going to treat them like they're part of us. We're going to make sure that they have a phenomenal experience with us. If they have an issue or a problem or a question, we're going to treat them like they're part of our family, like as if a family member got an SVS product and had a question about it. That's what we do. Every single member of that customer service team has pretty much dedicated their life to great sound, and this is what was their way to express it. And I guess when you look at an event like this with our community, just the number of comments, the positive energy, this is because you guys are a part of all of us. You truly are. This is why we do. Larry, how many events did we do last year? Was it more than 20? I feel like it was.
Yeah,
just in
like 25, 30 or so.
At least 20, yeah. And this is because we want to be with you guys. We want to hear your thoughts. We want to make sure that this is a company that reflects everyone in our community's hopes for what should be great sound, great products, great experience in every way. Is that okay? I mean,
I think it's just it was an interesting question for me to see because, I think people are conditioned to get on the phone and just get this never ending sort of prompt of, hit this number for this and never actually talk to a real person. But, there's a reason we call our service team the sound experts. And I think you sort of captured that pretty well. And I'm loving the comments here too. So while we didn't mean to be self-serving, I kind of thought this might happen. And I'm so happy to see there's a lot of people who have had these great experiences because we absolutely have it in our DNA. And, it's part of who we are and what our customer bill of rights is all about. So props to the folks who are calling us out. We really appreciate that.
Well, I can say this, I guess. We're interviewing for 2 positions in our customer service team in the middle of all this mess, believe it or not. But it's been so busy, I guess, because there's so many folks stuck at home and want everything to be perfect with their system, which I totally get. So we've put on some resources for that. But it reminded me because I met with them on Zoom, I met with a bunch of candidates on Zoom calls over the past few days. And one of our things that we always say is, look, maybe you worked in a company before where you have to check with somebody before you say yes to a request. Mm-hmm. This place, SVS, you need to check with somebody before you ever say no in a request. And we really believe that in our heart of hearts, that there's always a way to make someone happy. I'll leave it at that. I agree. I don't want to make it up. We promised ourselves we would never make this an SVS infomercial.
That was just such a lob. It was such a softball that
it was a lob.
We got to take that take a swing every once in a while. But I do think it's time for a giveaway. That might,
Amen.
Bring things back up, and then we'll be ready to bring out our guests. So the first giveaway chosen at random, we are giving away a pair of SVS Prime bookshelf speakers. Winner is Aaron Beard. Aaron Beard, we will drop you a note and we'll get you all set up. Congratulations, Aaron. So before we introduce our guest, I'll give him a little bit of love. He is one of my favorite people in the world just to hang out with in general, but also a brilliant acoustic engineer who has really brought a wealth of talent and knowledge to SVS and everything that we're doing in the product development side. Smith Freeman, our Director of Product Management. Smith, how the heck are you, buddy?
Hey guys, I'm doing well. How's everybody?
Good.
I think everybody's doing awesome, and I can tell there's a lot of people here who have some leading questions and things they want to know about the future. And I will preempt everyone by saying we do not discuss what we're going to be launching down the line. So
we can't speak for Smith. He loves to talk.
I know
what's going to happen here.
I do have a mute button here,
all of our trade secrets are about to be revealed.
Gary let some stuff
I have
out.
to be generous with this mute, but it is happy hour. It is 2:30 on the West Coast, but that's okay.
It is okay.
Smith's been drinking earlier.
I'm having some scotch, some Port Charlotte.
Scotch at 2:30 in the afternoon.
Yes.
Actually, it's not 2:30. It's 3:16.
It's quarter after 3. It's late.
That's right.
That's totally normal.
Perfect time for a happy hour, and I'm enjoying some Knob Creek with you. So, slang play to you. But I think really what I want to know, and what I think other people might want to know, is what sort of got you into great sound initially. Like, what was sort of your pathway into this? I guess it was probably a hobby before it was a passion, but maybe not.
No, it was a hobby, and I grew up in a house where music was always playing, and I grew up with a pair of scientists basically, and one of which was a very accomplished engineer, and I kind of found my own love for music and audio engineering and speaker design and speaker aesthetics and that whole path. And I went to college and studied physics and also studied music and art. And I really
is that a different pathway. Like, is that the typical pathway into the profession you're in now?
I don't think so. I think there's in the old world, I think that there were a lot of people that kind of started in their garage and hobbies grew into companies, and maybe in the new era, there's some way to find like a educational path that's adjacent that gets you into it. But I basically studied physics explicitly so that I could understand and chase audio. So a lot of
that to me is really unusual.
Yeah,
Smith, from a very young age, knew he wanted to make great sounding products. That's not, we know this from a lot of audio engineers, that's not typically the path. Usually they get to it from another place, like mechanical engineering or industrial design or even electrical engineering. Right. Smith is all about sound from day one. Would you agree with that, Smith? Not that
totally.
It's too much.
No, I mean, literally, I majored in physics, and then I studied music and I studied art. And it was always with this explicit purpose of trying to understand speaker design and wanting to do what I'm doing now. Basically, this was the holy grail that I was trying to get to all along. And then I even went to graduate school for acoustics. And really, I went to graduate school so I could find a way to get into the audio industry.
So when it comes down to actually designing the products, like how much of that is your passion versus the scientific knowledge? Like, is it 50-50? Like, how does that break down in your mind when you're actually going through this process?
I don't know if I could put a percentage on it, because it's almost like they're both 100%. You have to have which I guess means it's 50-50. But but
that's 200% now.
It is 200%. And so, but really, you can't have one without the other. Right? If you have a company and they're developing products, but there's no passion behind it, that shows. There's, part of the reason why I love being at SVS is that we have this passion for everything, every dimension of the company, and everything that we do. And I get to do that in speaker design. And at the same time, speaker design absolutely requires expertise, experience, the scientific method. So it's applying one into the other. Does that make sense?
It does. And let me ask you, because you came to us, you designed speakers for a lot of different companies, which I'm not going to name names. And actually, I didn't tell this story to Nick in the beginning, in the pre-conversations we had. But when I told the world I was on this search for what eventually became Smith's role, 3 different. I've been doing this a long time, so I have a lot of connections around even the world, but especially around our country in North America. And Smith's name was brought to me by 3 different people, which is totally, amazing if you think about it. There's plenty of people.
3 totally different people.
3 totally different people.
Totally
and they were all
different
about, Gary, you're all about sound. You need somebody who is as passionate and crazy about sound as you are. And then Smith and I kind of connected, and he was very like, this better be the one where I can create products that reflect my vision for great sound, because I think maybe it might be fair to say that your expertise was welcomed by the previous places that you designed products for, but not necessarily your passion for great sound. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I mean, I would go a little bit further and say that when you found me, I was pretty much on the threshold of writing off working in audio.
Wow.
I kind of saw this weird dichotomy of people making great products that were inaccessible or unavailable to the real world, to real people. And then I saw other products from companies that were maybe very successful or very big, but they were not really thinking of the customer and the performance as being this critical must-have metric. It was other things. And so I was kind of at my end thinking, maybe this is just not my era to be in the audio industry. And that's when Gary found me. And we kind of spiritually connected, and I realized that there was still a place for trying to make great sound for everybody.
So we've had
that
a couple
was part of the deal. We said we were going to make great sound for everybody. We were going to make it, right?
Yeah, totally. Absolutely.
Couple people
that's still our vision today.
What kind of headphones are you wearing? That's a quick one.
Actually, these are Gary's headphones that he lent to me, and I am now keeping forever. They're Bayer Dynamics.
Those are good headphones.
They are good headphones. They're really great headphones. Yeah, they're Bayer Dynamics, I think DT770s or DT990s.
That's great. A good headphone.
They're a great headphone.
Come back, Smith.
Come and get them.
So there's questions here that sort of all speak to the same thing, and it's how responsible are you for creating the sound profile that is SVS? And I think that speaks to both subwoofers and speakers. And I think as a second part of that, what is the most satisfying part about designing an audio product? And I think they might go hand in hand there. So maybe you can illuminate for us.
Yeah, I mean, I would love to take total ownership for it, but I would never do that. And Gary has a critical ear, literally, when we're designing the products. And we have a team of people that love audio, and they're all involved. But I would say a lot of the final execution of what our products sound like is me, it's Gary, it's Mitch, it's now Jack Mules, it's a whole bunch.
I mean, what are you
of us.
guys listening for? What are, like, there's that moment, I think the most satisfying thing that we've talked about before, but like what are those things that you're listening for in terms of critical measuring that really gets you to that point of, wow, I think we're onto something here? Yeah,
so there's all of the critical kind of analytical metrics for what a properly designed speaker should do. It should be have neutrality. It should have great transient response. It needs to make this projected 3D image, and it needs to have good dynamic range. And there's a lot of things that a speaker has to do and check all these boxes. And kind of like one of my favorite parts about this whole exercise in designing a speaker in particular is when all those things come together, and they come together seamlessly, and you stop paying attention to them, and you're just sitting there and you're just listening to the content. And we use a lot of the same demo tracks over and over again, and I will have a panic attack if one of them comes on when I'm not critically listening or trying to do my job.
You know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah, especially what particular Bob Dylan track.
Yes.
Right. I know which one you mean.
And but that being said, when we're in the product development cycle and we're making a speaker, like when we're making the Pinnacle, and we're at that time where everything's actually really working correctly together, you stop being analytical and you're just sitting there and you're just kind of letting it wash over you. And the next thing you know, it's on to the next track and the next track and the next track. And then you get this kind of hunger. You're just like, I want to hear this. I want to hear this. I want to hear this. And that's like the best part. That's
and,
like,
well, Smith, we always talk about what we're hearing with each other, right? It is collaborative. Like, we talk about it, and Smith has and so does Jack Mules, actually both have really, Jack Mules is one of our senior designers who's actually in New Zealand right now, believe it or not, the one place in the world where there's no COVID-19. But Smith and Jack know how to take what I am describing that I'm hearing, and they go, oh, this is what it needs to do in order to fix that kind of thing. And it's really fun and collaborative process to do, although it can be very tedious, right? We spend hours and hours trying to get it right.
There have been tears.
Glad you mentioned tears, and you mentioned Pinnacle earlier too. That to me is a project that I think we all thought, oh man, we're just remaking the Prime Tower. Like, how hard is this going to be? What was that experience like?
Yeah, I mean, it really was from the beginning. It was just like, well, we've got this, almost like a space between the Prime Tower and the Ultra Tower. Like, there needs to be something there, and it needs to do all these things. And like, how hard can this be? And it took forever. We made, Gary, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we went through like 4 or 5 like major full product revisions to the whole thing.
I mean, I know I was driving you crazy. We're probably driving each other crazy. We thought this was going to be a pretty straightforward project. It ended up being really, well, we wanted to make something that would just blow people away, right? I mean, we both shared that. And
sorry, go ahead, Gary.
No, I mean, I was just going to say that I'm more sad. Yes, it was a passive full range tower speaker that should have been easier to design, and we worked almost 2 years on it. But I'm even to this day, I get a smile on my face when I listen to Prime Pinnacles, and I do think about the process that got us there. It's a lot of speaker, especially when you think of the price, and it's gotten that's won more awards than any of our other speakers. So maybe it was worth it, Smith.
I think it's worth it. I mean, the pair that I have over here.
Yeah, I agree, sir.
We're in my main system now. That they give me joy.
So there's been some interesting comments too, sort of alluding to, what's your formula? Like, what do you do? What are you looking for? How do you sort of map things out? And I think Pinnacle's an example of how things can sort of, become much more difficult than you originally envisioned. But then there's also products that are sort of just surprise you, like they just came out of nowhere. And I know you and Gary had a late night in a bar one time, which was actually
no, it wasn't a bar.
It wasn't a bar. My bad. They didn't mean to.
It was a late night.
The lounge.
Well, after the bar. Yeah.
There were napkins that were being drawn on, so I just did the math myself. But it actually ended up being our most popular speaker. So do you know what I'm talking about?
I think you're talking about Prime Elevation. Yeah. When Smith and I were severely jet lagged and in a time zone we weren't used to being in, and sitting in a room together, staring at a wall and zoning out and talking about Dolby Atmos and why it's such a challenging format, because you had either an in-ceiling speaker that is always going to be compromised sonically, or you had this bouncing off the ceiling thing where it comes from the floor and bounces off the ceiling, which rarely works in the room, but even if it does work in some rooms, it doesn't work in all the seating positions. So we wanted to think it through, and I think, Smith, you had, to be fair, you had the first thought that, well, what if it could mount high on a sidewall and aim down at the person, which nobody had done yet. I don't know if anyone's doing it now, but that was a phenomenal breakthrough. And we kind of went from there and started making it into what it is today, which is such a versatile home theater speaker.
Yeah, no, that's totally right. I just remember that, I've been like ruminating about like this problem, because Atmos and height channels are an amazing effect. I mean, I remember the first time I went to see an Atmos movie in the theaters, and I was just totally blown away. It was almost like the first time I heard surround sound. It was such a dramatic experience, and having a way to do it in the home, all these executions felt like I can see why they exist, but this doesn't feel right. It doesn't taste right. And so I think that's where all this kind of thought process about like how do we do this for like normal people?
Right, because there's no such thing as a perfect room. That was really the thing. We were like, there's no such thing as a perfect room.
Right.
How do you make one speaker that works in all these different challenging installations or challenging places where it would go? And Smith, he's, if you can't tell, Smith is super humble. He's not like Nick, all bold and charisma. But Smith came up with the idea of the plate, the small plate. You mount the plate where you want the speaker to go using the supplied template, and then just snap the speaker onto the plate, and basically made it into one of the easiest speakers on the planet to install onto a wall. And but we've seen it now. It's used as height effects on a sidewall, high up on a sidewall. We've seen it now as we have an optional, for free, but optional ceiling mount kit, so it can literally mount on your ceiling. And then also it's being used, including in my system, as a surround speaker. So in my system, it's a side surround speaker. So pretty versatile, thanks to you, Smith.
And I tell everybody that it's probably the coolest enhancement I've made to my theater since Blu-ray audio got better. And we have the pair right above my head, and then we do them at our events and stuff, and people are floored by them because they're way more capable than what you hear out of other solutions, because they are a real speaker.
Right. I mean, that was really like a big part of it was this has to be a real speaker. It has to be a real product. It can't just be something for the sole purpose of effects. Like, we need to start by making it a real speaker. Yeah,
and so there's some questions about, can it be used as a real speaker? And the answer is absolutely yes. I mean, the brilliance of the bracket is that it allows you to put it in sort of any array, any format that you want, and it'll still do the job. So I think that's an important point that's worth stating is, when you're going to design a speaker to mount on the wall or on the ceiling, it's got to be easy to do if the regular DIY person. So I think that absolutely is a critical point. And I put up this comment from Jim Ruff because I do think it's interesting to hear from an engineer's perspective. And I wouldn't even describe SVS sound. How would you describe great sounds? Because I think that's what all speaker manufacturers should strive for. But in your opinion, like, what are those adjectives? Like, how do you describe great sound? And, what are the words that you use to sort of articulate it?
Transparency and neutrality. It's really just, those are two of the big ones for me, where the speaker should not be imparting its own voice on what you're trying to listen to. Like, I don't need to design a speaker to make, Chris Cornell sound better. He sounds great on his own. All I need to do is bring him into the room. And so a totally transparent speaker its job is just to bring the content and not impart anything else. So that's, people talk about a flat frequency response, and that's kind of where that starts. But you have to go a lot further than just an on-axis flat frequency response to get, a neutral projection from a loudspeaker. Well,
I think that that's that science and art sort of intersection, because not only does it have to sound good in a perfect anechoic, chamber environment, but it also has to sound great in a basement or a small den or whatever.
Right.
And Gary, I know, that's a big part of our voicing process is making sure that you get that. So, I don't think you can just limit the definition of, great sound, or what we try to do with our speakers, by saying clarity, transparency, neutrality. It's also in-room response and performance. So if you guys want to add on to that, I'd love to hear your thoughts.
That's a great comment, actually. Our process, which is the right process, but sometimes it's so tedious that sometimes it's not fully done by companies. We start with, Smith is very, very good at starting with a design that has no physical thing. It's Smith using a computer and using some very, very sophisticated design software to create a design and that predicts how the speaker will sound. And then we make prototypes that we test in an anechoic chamber, which, as I think our community knows, that's a perfect or semi-perfect environment to measure, but has nothing to do with the room. Or it attempts to have nothing to do with the room. and we try to get as full flat frequency response as we can in that scenario. And that's when we start listening to the speaker, measuring how it behaves in the room, making adjustments, listening some more, and then bringing it back to the anechoic chamber to see what we did. Smith, I'll let you put some editorial on that, but that's it, right?
No, that's exactly right. The whole beginning starts in simulations, so there's mechanical software that I use, there's acoustic software that we use to simulate what the crossover is going to do, what the drivers are going to do, what the cabinet and the port tunings, if there's ports, and just the whole thing. And then eventually, when that all reaches a good milestone, we then go and start prototyping and building the first engineering samples. And it's just like what Gary's saying, is we build those samples, and then there's just copious amounts of acoustic measurements that are done and work to qualify the simulations and get everything measuring well, and then it all comes into the listening room. And the truth is that there's a million ways that you can make a loudspeaker that measures flat, and probably all but a couple of them will sound terrible. Flat doesn't mean good. Flat just means flat. And this iterative process of where is the right frequency response for the actual performance of the product in a real space. Because an anechoic chamber is literally a space with no reflections. You see those big wedges that they're all there just to absorb all the reflections. So all you hear is the direct sound from the speaker and none of the room. And it's you would never want to listen to a product in that space.
So
that's just a scientific space to measure a product.
I think we're seeing the geeks come out in full force, and I mean that in the nicest possible way, because we are getting some very technical
people,
which I love. We might have to start the Smith Audiophile happy hour where we just address the most technical questions. But I'll throw this one up.
Somebody said that Smith's a better guest than DJ Jazzy Jeff, which is
that was
quite impressive, Smith.
I flashed that one because we had the conversation with Jeff about how he mixes audio for all sorts of different listening through headphones, through speakers, through a home theater. And now to hear your perspective about, how we do that from the speaker design side, it just shows how all these things are kind of interwoven.
Yeah, it's different flavors of a very similar act. And so, what he's doing on the creation side, like he's creating content. So he gets to decide what it sounds like. I mean, that is the art of art. And then he has an engineering challenge on top of that of saying, well, how are people going to experience this in these different with these different listening devices, whether it's the headphones came through with your phone, or if it's some exotic 2-channel system, or if it's SVS's product, just how does it sound in that spectrum? So that's he's battling similar things and trying to evaluate how something sounds. And then our job is really, how do we make sure that we're being true and honest to his work, to his original creative work?
That is the key.
I think that's
I think we're having so much fun talking with Smith that I think we're due for a giveaway. What do you think, Nick?
I was just about to say the same thing. So let me just go to my randomizer here. This is a Facebook winner, and we're giving away an SB2000 Pro. Ben Farrell from Facebook, SB2000 Pro. Congratulations, Ben. We will get you.
I think there's a lot of new people here, so let's tell them it's one of our top selling subwoofer.
That is absolutely one of our. It's our newest sealed cabinet subwoofer, and it has become our most popular subwoofer as of the. It's pretty much since the day it launched. So
right.
Very exciting for you, Ben, and we'll continue to roll those out. Some exciting reviews coming out on those as well. So congrats to you, Ben.
Well, Nick, can I ask Nick a question?
We have a few more minutes with you, but I did want to give an opportunity to share one of your personal.
I think. Hey, Nick. I think these guys are having so much fun with Smith. I mean, I don't think. Maybe you should kick me off and leave Smith on here.
How about I kick myself off?
Well,
no, we need you.
Question that kind of went back to something you were saying earlier, and it's something that comes up at a lot of our events and when we're doing trainings and stuff is we don't make a speaker that's just for music or that's just for movies.
That's important to say.
Yeah, I'm curious what kind of your thought process is there, and if you've kind of experienced the exact opposite previously.
I've experienced the opposite from other companies who make some fantastic product, and I'm not trying to like fault anybody, but when a speaker when a speaker is best for certain genres of music is actually what I experienced at one point. I thought, like, when I heard that particular genre of music, I was like, oh, wow, this is an amazing presentation. And then I heard something that was totally inappropriate, and I'm like, this is all wrong. It's all wrong. And I'm like, that means the whole thing's wrong. So, for us, I don't know if someone's going to use prime bookshelves for music or a movie or a video game or a sporting event or for whatever it is, and it shouldn't matter, right? The speaker's job is to just present the content, whatever it is, faithfully as best as it can. And if you are taking, looking at it from like kind of a scientific standpoint or like an engineering standpoint, that's very concrete goals. If you're too far into the passion of just like, well, this thing's got to do jazz just right. It's like, well, guess what? Like, jazz is cool, but you're going to miss a whole bunch of other stuff that's not jazz. Yep. And we're trying to make products for everybody. And that means making products for everything.
I mean, a great speaker is a great speaker, right?
Right.
I mean, if
totally.
if it literally only sounded good, and I can tell you what the characteristics of the speaker would be, and so could Smith. If it only sounded good with this type of music, or only sounds good with certain kinds of music, but not movies or whatever, I'm going to say it's not a great speaker. A great speaker should be able to, as you said. Maybe I'm repeating what you already said.
I mean, that's what it is, and that's part of the reason why, like, our test tracks, when we actually get to the critical listening with real content, it's a broad spectrum. I mean, there's, generally you could say that test tracks should be male vocal and female vocal and solo and large group instrumental and maybe some electronic music and some loud stuff and some quiet stuff. But literally our main playlist consists of Miles Davis and Nora Jones, but also includes A Perfect Circle and 9 Inch Nails. And so, that's a broad spectrum. And so when hip hop. And so, and it's everything in between.
And solo cello suites, Bach solo cello suites.
Absolutely. So if the speaker is doing everything right, we can listen to all of those and say yes, 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 all across the board. And literally, I'll go back to the design if there's one of those that it's not doing right.
It's very interesting. And there absolutely are, there's this mentality of like, well, you can only be great at one thing. You got to pick your poison. And I think we're really out to prove that that's not true. But I have an interesting question here from Adam Janetta about innovation. I mean, loudspeakers are pretty much, they're not that much different than they were. There's obviously new technologies that are emerging around wireless and certain control aspects. But, being on the front lines of this kind of thing, like, what have you really seen in terms of innovation, and how much can you really do with the technology to make a speaker sound great?
Yeah, I mean, Kellogg and company patented like the conventional loudspeaker, like it was like 1890 something. So that core design of just a basket and there's a motor and there's a coil of wire and there's a diaphragm, that design is well over 100 years old. So for sure in the last 20 years and since then, a lot has moved forward in material science and manufacturing techniques and our ability to make more precise and more complex shapes and make them reliably and consistently across the board. So, 50 years ago, maybe you'd buy 10 raw drivers and you'd measure all of them and you would get this wild spread across all of them. And now when we produce a speaker, we basically make it the same like every single time. So our ability to tune something with precision and design and engineer it with precision, but then also to make it with precision is leaps and bounds ahead of where we were, decades ago.
So, I mean, magnets don't change. Those kind of things all remain the same. You can use certain exotic materials, but that only gets you so far. It's really sort of, the those aspects that mean the most.
Right, and it's still the application of all those different materials and aspects that make a finished product. So, I mean, there's a lot to be said for material science, like the different grades of magnets that we use in, say, like our subwoofer drivers. That was not really possible, 20, 30 years ago. And we're able to execute, crazy magnetics to make huge SBLs in our subwoofers. And that's just on the driver side. So then there's the whole other end of the spectrum, software and the electronics and amplifiers, power supplies. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that's done a lot better.
I mean, just to say, and by the way, I'm watching these comments. Everyone, there's this one guy that's getting really mad at me for not smiling. Let me show you. This is me smiling. This is as close to
He's not kidding. He's not kidding.
Gary's very smiling right now.
This is Gary smiling. But
Rusty bitching.
What I was going to say is, that is the essence of what we do. What you just said, that's the essence of it. And I think our name is Sound Revolution with a thing between the R and the E, because there's a lot of things in our speakers and our subwoofers that are evolutionary, meaning we keep changing them. We make changes to improve them every single month and year. And then, but then there's other things we do, like, for example, the 8-inch edge wound voice coil that you came up with, or the digital front end MOSFET back end of our amplifiers, or the DSP that we're putting in there.
So I'm glad you brought up the DSP, Gary. I don't want to cut you off, but I think that's an interesting one. A couple of people asked, like, that's not necessarily technology, and but it is, like, the 50 megahertz, like that's something special that not everyone pays attention to.
I mean, the fact is that SVS subwoofers, every SVS subwoofer is configured in the digital domain. And that was not even possible probably 15 years ago. Would you agree, Smith? Maybe even less than that.
Yeah, I mean, certainly
Tell
wasn't.
me I'm wrong. It's okay if I'm wrong. You can say it. But
I think 15, 20 years ago, like, subwoofers were probably, just getting into the early, like, the first heydays, and almost everything was still analog. Absolutely.
Yeah, and I don't think even today there's anybody that's doing 100% of their subwoofers all the way down to the 1000 series where it's all done in the digital domain. And that, to me, is a disruptive, positive technology. There's so much more you can do in the digital domain, right, Smith, to configure a subwoofer.
Yeah. So this question I think is interesting, because when we talk about design, talk about a subwoofer as an ecosystem. And so to sort of limit it to be like, what's the most critical component, does it a disservice, because it's not about any one part. It's about them working in tandem. So what is the mindset when you go into designing a subwoofer? Is it like you sort of have this blueprint from other ones you've done before, or is it pretty much start from scratch with every new model? I'm interested to know sort of the thought process there.
There's certainly a lot of borrowing that we do. So, like the DSP that we developed for the 16 Ultras, I mean, that was a ground up new whole DSP architecture. And so that does get borrowed and work its way through the product line. Not necessarily out of efficiency, but because it's a great DSP, and it's incredibly powerful, and it allows us to do just tremendous things with a product. But then there's other things that have to be kind of a ground up exercise each time. And there's other things that, maybe we already, like, we're kind of fixed, and like, we know we can't go any bigger than, say, this size or whatever it is. But at the end of the day, everything is trying to be optimized, right? We look at every part of it and say, can this be better? How do we make this better? How does this part get better? And then the repercussions of making those things better. If we make this amplifier better and we give it more power, what is that going to do to the driver? And then if now we've made the driver has higher output, what is that doing to the cabinet? Okay, now we have to. So all these things are literally married together, and you really cannot ignore any single element of it. I mean, down to the screw. I mean, it sounds silly, but like down to the screw, you have to make sure that everything is working well together.
So
That's
we've
great.
talked a little bit about
Before we go to the next question, just because I'm looking at our timing, you've only given 2 of the prizes. I think you should give the 3rd prize.
I was just going to say,
give a prize, Nick.
And then you can.
People
This is a
want
good
prize.
question. This person asks, Mark. Mark. We'll just call him Mark.
Mark, we'll get to your question, but our next giveaway will be our SVS PB1000 subwoofer. We're choosing from YouTube Justin Keys, Kiesz. Justin Keys from YouTube. You are the proud owner of a SVS PB1000 subwoofer. Congratulations, my man. We will reach out to you and get that taken care of. So Smith, we've had this conversation, Gary, I think without Smith, about the subjectivity versus the objectivity of a subwoofer and its place within a home theater or a hi-fi system. So does it even enter your mindset, other speaker manufacturers when you're designing a subwoofer, or is it you're just making a great sub, doesn't matter?
I mean, I know the other speaker manufacturers are out there, but I mean, at the end of the day, like our job is to make the best subwoofer that we can. And
but I think the thrust of this question is he's kind of asking the characteristics of speakers. Do they dictate what you do to design a subwoofer? And I don't want to lead the witness. I think you should probably say what you're going to say, but then I'm going to have my own take on it. But yeah, he's basically saying, how do you make a subwoofer that perfectly matches every brand speaker, or do you just pick a couple to match up with?
Yeah, I mean, right. I mean, if I'm doing my job right and we're designing the subwoofer and to do the right things, it shouldn't care what speakers we're gonna.
Thank you for saying that. I was hoping you'd say that. I mean, look, a speaker is we always say this, a speaker is, and Smith, this is your question, but I'll just frame it. Speakers, even though there's so many objective things we do to make our speakers as great as they possibly can be, as great sounding as they can be, transparent, I love how you put it, transparent, and basically as doing as little as possible to change what's going into them, to make them reflective of what the artist or the producer intended. Totally agree with that. But in the end of the day, the end user or the listener might pick one characteristic over another because speakers are a little bit subjective. Would you agree?
Totally. I mean, speakers are the most personal piece of electronics you might ever buy.
That's right.
But
so a subwoofer is a subwoofer. I'm really leading the witness now. Is a subwoofer subjective?
It's probably not. I mean, if it's doing everything right, it really shouldn't be.
We can define what a subwoofer does, and we do, right? I mean, all those things we talk about, we do. And poor Smith and I have to sit there sometimes listening to a subwoofer alone, right?
Mm-hmm.
I've complained about that. Yeah, I have nightmares about listening to just a subwoofer, but it's true.
Yeah, that's a weird A/B test when you're switching back and forth between just listening to subwoofers, hitting some particular like double bass note on some Miles Davis track, and you're just like, oh, it seems a little bit tighter here, But yeah, going back.
Is there anything that can't be measured, Smith, or can everything be measured?
I think we can measure way more than we can perceive, but I don't know if we can always understand the measurements versus what we perceive, right? And then especially when it comes to speakers, there's a lot of work and effort done in trying to correlate measurement on axis, off axis, aggregate versus what a subjective listening experience yields. And that's not a clear-cut line, and that gap, I think, kind of preserves the art in the acoustics and the tuning of a loudspeaker. The tuning and acoustics of a subwoofer, is a different animal. But I just want to say also, when talking about like how speakers are personal, like this is not a small deal. Speakers are a very personal thing that you're going to invite into your home, and you're going to live with them in your space. And so that's something for me, that's always in the forefront of my mind when I even think about what a speaker looks like. And Gary, you and I have spent a lot of time, even with the Pinnacle recently, just about what that product needs to look like. Because you're gonna.
Would you agree? Almost everything we do from looks is just based on it's a very form follows function. Like we want
Absolutely.
First thing we start with is it has to sound good.
Has to sound good.
Every change
right.
we made in Prime Pinnacle had nothing to do with the looks, although it ended up being an elegant speaker.
That's true. That's totally true.
So I had a question up here earlier. I think we dove into the technology a little bit, and this will probably be the last question. Then I had a fun topic that I wanted to dive into, which I'm hoping the commenters will offer their 2 cents on it. But the materials. I mean, I know that technology and that stuff hasn't changed much, but you can get some really sort of esoteric, expensive materials to build a speaker with. How much does that actually affect the performance when you're talking about the amount you have to raise the price to actually source these materials and all that good stuff? There's quite a few questions to that end.
I'm a firm believer in the law of diminishing returns. So, if when you're down low and you make a 100% improvement, you get, or 100% increase in maybe price of materials, then you get a really big appreciable improvement. But as you go farther and farther up that chain, you're still having to do 100% price increase, and you're getting this tiny, tiny gain. You can see the same thing with like road bikes or high performance cars or other things where you start using these really exotic materials that are exceedingly expensive, and you're doing that because you're just trying to get some now you're getting to like the questionable like measurement improvement, and so there's a lot to be said for what can be done with good engineering on all levels with more reasonable materials. That being said, like for example, like beryllium. Beryllium is a tremendous material with unbelievable properties. But can we do better? Can we do more with aluminum? Maybe.
For sure.
So there's and that's part of my job is that do we want to literally make something that's stratosphere expensive for this incremental, maybe not even appreciable improvement?
One of the things I love about you, Smith, is you're so passionate about what your profession is, but you also have some really cool hobbies. And before we sign off with you and do our last giveaway, I did have to flash something on screen here. Can you tell us about what this hobby is all about, and sort of how, if any, if it relates to your sort of profession at all?
This is rock climbing. I'm bouldering in Joshua Tree National Park a long time ago when I lived in California. Climbing is a very cerebral mental activity that requires total concentration. So not unlike designing a good loudspeaker, I guess.
Are you thinking about speakers when you're hanging upside down like that?
Definitely not. I'm not thinking about anything other than what I'm doing, which is one of the reasons why I love it.
Yeah, and cool. There's some insane pictures of him on like 6-story boulders with no harnesses or anything. I mean, you got to have some guts for that. So props to you, and maybe someday you can take me on the Bunny Hill version of
you got it.
I went up and down some stairs a few times.
It's impressive.
Yeah.
Well, Smith, I think based on the response, we are going to have you on again. So really appreciate you obviously taking some time out and having a happy hour at 2:30 your time. I know that's a tough call for you.
Easy for me. Cheers.
Really appreciate it. And we will definitely catch up, and we'll get to some of these questions we didn't get to answer at a future date, but really appreciate it. Thank you, Smith.
Thank you.
Good job, Smith. That was fun.
All right. Well, we're right up against the time. So we actually had a funny question that came in, and actually we did a social post about this a while ago. And so I just thought I would bring it up here because some people, they have a tendency to name their cars. They give their car like a female's name or whatever. And, they had asked us, have we ever named a piece of our audio equipment? So before I list my favorites, Larry, have you ever given a name to any of your AV equipment?
Not personally. I've had some fun with the Subwoofer app where you can rename some stuff. And when I had the SB16 Ultra downstairs, we named it Big Bada Boom from Fifth Element, just to give it a little more creative name. But I know there are some people out there that have really gone kind of over the top and created some interesting names, kind of like they would their car or a boat. So,
well, we'd love to see them in the comments. Gary, what about you? Have you ever named a piece of audio equipment?
Only when it broke. Then it had many names.
4 letters.
Well,
No,
you named
I
Prime
don't do
Pinnacle,
that.
but I don't think we're going that route. So,
And by the way, nothing SVS ever broke.
That's there you
I
go.
want to be clear about that.
So the favorites that I saw and that we got from our post a couple of years ago, and these are mostly subwoofer names. I think it's probably easier to name a subwoofer just based on what they do. But my 2 favorites were Richard Hertz and Bottom Dweller. But I'm going to rattle off a bunch more, and I'd love for you guys to share your own names. But I've seen Neighbor Destroyer, Front Loader, Zarbomba, what the hell is that in air quotes, Maximus Rumble, Home Wrecker, Lucifer and Mazikeen, which are 2 evil spirits, if I'm not mistaken. The Rebel Base, Thrustmaster, Thumper, Bottom Rocker, San Andreas, the Evictor, Temple of Boom, Quaker Maker, Bass Boss, Lease Breaker, the Wub Suffer, Silas Booms, Air Blaster, Ultron, and somebody named their PC 4000 Gus. So there you go. But I think before we wrap up with our teaser for the next one, our last giveaway of the evening will be a Prime Wireless sound base, and our winner is from Facebook, Kevin Paradis. Kevin Paradis from Facebook, congratulations! You are the recipient of our 300-watt 2-channel integrated wireless streaming amplifier, the Prime Wireless sound base. Congratulations! Phenomenal little amp there you got yourself. It'll make an awesome 2-channel system for your home. So our next broadcast will be in 2 weeks on Thursday. The actual date for that, I should know this, June 11th, I believe, is what I have here.
sometime in June.
Same time. And we have a couple of guests.
June 11th.
June 11th. So I was right. 6 p.m., same time. We are still looking at doing some alternative times. I know some of you folks in Europe and around the world are tuning into us at all sorts of crazy times. So we will try to mix it up down the road a little bit. But obviously, super excited. Really happy to have everyone here. Any closing thoughts before we sign off tonight, Gary?
I thought this was so much fun, and I think people really appreciated Smith being here with his insights. So that was great. I enjoyed this. I always do enjoy it. So great to be with everybody from our community. You guys are our gang. Really thankful we have you in our lives.
Yeah, my biggest regret is we just can't answer more questions.
Right. There were so many good questions.
They come so
fun ones too. Yeah, there's you guys making jokes. We appreciate that too. So you probably saw me laughing.
I'm going to try to smile more.
All good. All right. Well, thank you everybody for tuning in again. We will see you in 2 weeks, and stay safe, everyone. Stay healthy, and can't wait to do this again. Bye.
Bye, everybody.
Bye, everybody.